Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am back on your screens. This is real. This is real life. I am back after been a long hiatus with school, work, just been a busy summer, been a busy first few weeks of school as well. But the NFL is back, so I had to come back as well. We will be back here weekly, throwing out videos, throwing out content. But since I'm making my big return on the first day of the NFL, being back with real games, Ravens and Chiefs a little bit later tonight. I thought I'd give you my 2024-25 NFL predictions with division winners, playoff teams, awards, and of course, the Super Bowl matchup that I think is going to happen in New Orleans this February for the NFL season. So let's get started. We will start with division winners. First off, and first foremost, the NFC North. As if some of you have maybe new to this channel here, I'm a Bears fan. Loved Hard Knocks. Wish I could have put out content reacting to the Hard Knocks episodes, but hey, couldn't. But fantastic show, fantastic series. If you didn't see it, you should go watch it. Caleb Williams could be the next Michael Jordan. That's what they were saying in the documentary and Hard Knocks. I think it could be true, but that's a different subject for a different day. But the NFC North winners, I have the Detroit Lions going back to back as NFC North champions, making it to the NFC Championship last year. Jared Goff, Amon St. Brown, Jameer Gibbs, David Montgomery, the entire crew is back. They added Terry Arnold this offseason as a cornerback. I think the secondary will be a lot better. I think playoff experience, this team will be a lot better. They didn't really lose any guys. Lions, I have winning the NFC North. NFC South, I moved to, is a different team with a completely different look and a different quarterback. I have the Atlanta Falcons taking the NFC South with Kirko Chains, Kirk Cousins, Drake London's been there, Bijan Robinson's been there his second year now. Kyle Pitts has been there. They just didn't have the quarterback. Now they got the quarterback. I think that's an easy division to win. I know the Buccaneers won it last year. Buccaneers still have Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans, but Raheem Morris, new Atlanta Falcons head coach down there. I still think that the Atlanta Falcons will be a new team to win the NFC South. Moving on to the NFC West, a familiar foe at the top of the NFC West, I have the San Francisco 49ers. Lost in the Super Bowl last year. Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, whole crew is back. Even Brandon Ayuk is back. That was a whole saga this entire offseason. But they are all back. Kyle Shanahan is back. I think the 49ers take that division. I know Trent Williams just restructured his contract. He's now officially back. He should be back there week one. Maybe a little bit of a shaky start for them, but I think they'll be fine. I think they win the NFC West, even though the Rams are coming. NFC East now, I have the Philadelphia Eagles winning it. There's been so much talk about this offseason with the Philadelphia Eagles, with Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni butting heads. But they did get Saquon Barkley. Kellen Moore is now the offensive coordinator there. Vic Fangio is the defensive coordinator. So they cleaned house on coordinators, brought in new coordinators. Vic Fangio was solid with the Miami Dolphins as their coordinator. Kellen Moore has had success with the Cowboys, a little bit with the Chargers. But now he's in Philadelphia now. So I got the Eagles winning the division. Cowboys have regressed. They haven't made any moves. Commanders, I think they're still a couple years away. Giants, Daniel Jones is the quarterback, so I can't put them as the division leaders. Moving over now to the AFC, starting with the AFC North, which is probably the hardest division to pick in this entire conference, in this entire league in general, in the National Football League. But I have the Cincinnati Bengals winning the AFC North. Joe Burrow is back. Ja'Marr Chase, I think, will be back. Still has not had a contract signed. That's been another saga this offseason. But T. Higgins is playing out a contract here. They lost Joe Mixon. They've had some shaky things, but Joe Burrow has been there this entire offseason. I think, whole training camp, that this is the first full training camp. He's been hurt past couple training camps. I have the Cincinnati Bengals winning the NFC North there. Moving over to the AFC South, they won it last year, and I got them winning it this year. The Houston Texans, C.J. Stroud, D'Amico Ryan's second year there in their tenure there in Houston. Love this team. Love they added Stephon Diggs. They added Joe Mixon, who was on the Cincinnati Bengals last year. They added him. This team's only going to get better. Will Anderson on the defensive side of the ball. I really like what Houston's doing down there, and I think they're going to win the AFC South. But watch out for the Colts. They are a sleeper team to possibly win that division. Move over to the AFC West. This is no sleeper, and it's a two-time defending champions of the National Football League, the Kansas City Chiefs. I have them winning the AFC West. I think this is a relatively easy division for them to win, even though the Chargers, I think, could make a little bit of noise. And same with the Denver Broncos. Raiders can't even really talk about them, but I still think those are rebuilding years for the Broncos and the Chargers. So I do think Kansas City should handle this division pretty quickly and pretty early in the NFL season. AFC East now, it was Bills and Dolphins last year fighting it back and forth with Aaron Rodgers out. I had the Dolphins winning this division. I think the Dolphins know that they need the number one seed overall in the AFC to go deep in the playoffs because they just can't win in the cold weather. And if it's not in a dome and it's in November, they're going to struggle. So I think they're going to come out of the gate fast like they did last year. But I do think that the Dolphins need the number one seed almost out of any contender in the AFC as a whole. So I think the Dolphins are going to come out strong and win that NFC East. So those are division winners. So those teams automatically will be in the playoffs. But let me just give you all of my AFC teams that I think will make the playoffs. Chiefs, as I mentioned, Bengals, as I mentioned, Texans, and Dolphins. All four division winners make the playoffs automatically. Now, if you think about it, for the last, I think it's 7 to 8 years, almost half of the playoff teams from the previous year didn't make the playoffs this year or the following year. So, and there was one division winner in there's at least one division winner who went from last to first in their division, which Bengals were last year. So I have them winning first this year. So check off the mark box for that, but I don't have checking it off the box when it comes to new NFL or new teams in the playoffs. I only have 4 new teams. Chiefs are not a new team. Bengals are a new team. Dolphins and Texans are not new teams. I also have the Ravens in the playoffs. And the Jets, I have getting into the playoffs as a new team, and then the Bills being the last team in. I think Browns, Jags, and Colts are going to be on the fringe of making it, but I think Aaron Rodgers has to make the playoffs. I think he knows he has to make the playoffs. I think the Bills with Josh Allen are still too good. Lamar Jackson, now adding Derrick Henry, I think they'll make the playoffs. But yeah, the Jets and Bills are probably the teams that I'm most worried about making the playoffs, maybe Dolphins too. But so the AFC East is kind of like up in the air a little bit for me. But those I have for my AFC teams making the playoffs. I don't have the Browns making the playoffs. They made it last year, so only a couple new teams there. Move over to the NFC though, who I have overall winning at the conference and getting in the first seed. I have the Detroit Lions. The Lions have that playoff experience. I think they know the home atmosphere is a big thing. Jared Goff is a lot better in the domes in warm weather cities than he is, in a Philadelphia or a Green Bay. So or Seattle. So I think the Lions are also going to push for the number one seed. And I think they actually get the number one seed. Number 2, I have the 49ers. I think they're still solid. I think they'll be in that 1-2 seed range. Eagles, I have getting the 3rd seed, and Falcons, I have getting the 4th seed. I think Eagles probably go 11-6, Falcons 10-7, around there. But another team that I have making the playoffs who made it last year for the NFC is the Rams and the Packers, 5 and the 6 seed range. So Falcons are the only new team I have making the playoffs on the NFC side, besides one team, which if you've been listening to me for a little bit or watching me for a little bit, I'm a Bears fan, and I think the Bears are going to get the 7th seed. I said this possibly last year, that Bears were going to make a possible run to the playoffs, but I think this year, in particularly, with Caleb Williams, with Rome Odunze, all those weapons, just everything they've added and invested into this team this offseason, I think the Bears will be the 7th seed. And being the 7th seed at 10-7 is not a crazy record to put for the Bears. So 10-7 will get you the 7th seed, and I think that's what will happen with the Bears. I think the Bears will be a new team, and I think the Falcons will be a new team. So I only have 4 total new teams in the entire AFC and NFC making the playoffs. I don't have the Cowboys making the playoffs. Cowboys didn't add enough to me for me to feel like they can make the playoffs. They have no running game. Dak Prescott, in my opinion, cannot win without a legit running game, and I think they will struggle with only having CeeDee Lamb as their legit weapon. I know they have Jake Ferguson, Brandon Cooks, but I know they signed Dalvin Cook as 2 as well, but I just don't think this Cowboys team is going to make the playoffs. This doesn't even mention losing Dan Quinn. I know Mike Zimmer's the defensive coordinator there now, but Dan Quinn was so huge on that defensive side of the ball. I don't think the Dallas defense is going to be as good as well. So offenses are going to regress, and I think defenses are going to regress. So that's why I have the Cowboys not make the playoffs. I think they'll be just on the cusp of it, but I don't think they will make it. I also have the Seahawks and Bucks being on the fringe of making the playoffs, but I don't think those teams will make the playoffs. So Bucks won the division last year. Cowboys made the playoffs last year, but I just don't think those teams will make it this year. So moving on to the awards now. And I've kind of gone back and forth on this a little bit with a lot of different spots, but I think Coach of the Year will be Raheem Morris. I think they will get the Falcons in the playoffs. I think automatically he'll get Coach of the Year. Comeback Player of the Year, Most Improved Player, whatever it's called nowadays, I think it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. So I think if Aaron Rodgers gets the Jets to the playoffs, he'll be Comeback Player of the Year, only playing 4 or 5 snaps with the New York Jets last year. I think if he gets them into the playoffs, he'll win Comeback Player of the Year. Raheem Morris win Coach of the Year, getting them to the playoffs. You kind of get what I'm putting down here. It's new teams that have kind of made the playoffs or kind of winning awards. CJ Stroud was Offensive Rookie of the Year last year, made the playoffs with Houston. So you kind of know where I'm going with Offensive Rookie of the Year. And yes, it is Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears. I think if he gets into I think he will win Offensive Rookie of the Year regardless, but especially if he gets the Bears to the playoffs, excuse me, if he gets the Bears to the playoffs, hands down, who win Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think Jaden Daniels and Marvin Harrison Jr. will be the 2 people competing with Caleb Williams to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, but I just don't think it will do it. Defensive Player of the Year, or excuse me, Defensive Rookie of the Year. I have Laiatu Latu, who's in Indianapolis, bordering the Chicago Bears in Indianapolis with the Colts. I think he's going to transform that Indianapolis Colts defense, especially on that defensive line. He's a great speed rusher. He reminds me a lot of TJ Watt. So look forward to him on Sundays making some havoc on some quarterbacks and some offenses in the league. So Laiatu Latu from UCLA, I think he will win Defensive Rookie of the Year. Offensive Player of the Year, sticking with the AFC, I think it'll be Tyreek Hill. Christian McCaffrey won it last year. Tyreek Hill arguably could have won it for them too, or could have won it that year as well. I think he wins it this year with Miami Dolphins, especially if they get to the playoffs and win the division. And Miami gets going and running. I think Tyreek Hill could possibly break Calvin Johnson's record this season, as well as most receiving yards in a single season. Defensive Player of the Year, I have Nick Bosa. I think Nick Bosa is just a solid pick to go with Defensive Player of the Year. I'm worried about Micah Parsons with that defense with the Cowboys, so I'm not going to put him as my Defensive Player of the Year, but I think Nick Bosa is a more solid option. I'm kind of playing it by the books when it comes to Defensive Player of the Year. No, I'm not going to lie. I just think Nick Bosa just wreaks havoc every single year. I think he could possibly win Defensive Player of the Year. Always good. The Niners defense is always solid too as well. Now, for MVP, there's been a lot of talk about Jordan Love. There's been some talk about Patrick Mahomes. Lamar Jackson won it last year. Who can win it this year? Could it be a non-quarterback? I don't think that's the case. I think it is a quarterback, and I'm going with Joe Burrow to win the NFL MVP. He was injured last year as well. I don't think he would win Comeback Player of the Year if he wins MVP, so I think he's going to win the MVP. Jamar Chase isn't there, but I just think the Cincinnati Bengals, I think they will have an actual fast start this year. Previous years, they've been, I think the last 3 years, the record's like 1-5 in their first 3 games or something like that, or something like that. They're 1-5 in the last, to start the games, weeks 1 through 3, their last 3 seasons, I believe. So, or last 2 seasons, excuse me. So math. Joe Burrow, I think will win MVP. No Joe Mixon. I think he's gonna be throwing the football a lot more. I think he's gonna put up some numbers. T. Higgins is in a contract year. I think he's gonna want to put up numbers. Jamar Chase is going to get paid eventually. He's gonna want to showcase that he earned that money. And I think Joe Burrow is going to be the NFL MVP this season. Now we got playoff teams out of the way, division winners out of the way, awards out of the way. Now it comes down to who do I have going to the Super Bowl to represent the AFC and the NFC and ultimately win the Super Bowl in New Orleans in February. And I was going back and forth on this with a few teams. I think the real contenders in the AFC are the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Texans, and the Ravens. I think it's those four teams. The AFC are real contenders. And the NFC, I think it's the Lions, 49ers, Rams, Packers, and Eagles. I have five teams in the NFC that could be real contenders. I'll start with the AFC. I'll start with the AFC. And I was going back and forth mainly between the Chiefs, Bengals, and Ravens. And I just think the Chiefs have so much. Their nucleus is just unbeatable when it comes to Mahomes, Reed, Kelsey, Chris Jones. They just know how to win in the playoffs. They know they've faced these teams before. They faced the Ravens a few times in the playoffs. They faced the Bengals a couple times in the playoffs. And they faced the Bills a couple times in the playoffs. I just think the Chiefs, just their nucleus, they just know how to win in the playoffs. And I think if it runs through Arrowhead again, I think the Chiefs could be they'll be booked to the AFC Championship game. And if it's the Ravens, I like the Chiefs again. If it's the Bengals, that's where it gets dicey because Joe Burrow has done it before. He's gone to Kansas City, won the AFC title game, and gone to the Super Bowl. But I just think the Chiefs' nucleus is just so locked in. They've had their sights set on ring 3, being the first back-to-back champion ever, three-peating. So I think they've had their sights set on it since they won the last Super Bowl in February in Arizona. So I have the Chiefs representing the AFC, and the NFC, I have a new team. And I have the Detroit Lions representing the NFC in the Super Bowl in New Orleans this February, excuse me. I think the 49ers are going to have some injury issues. And I'm worried about if they lose one of their weapons in the playoffs, that could come to bite them in the butt because it's really Kittle, Debo, Ayuk, and CMC and Purdy. If you lose one or even two of those guys, this offense is completely different. I think the Lions will have home field advantage. I don't think that matters for the Niners, but I think that matters more for the Lions. I think Dan Campbell, this Lions team, has learned so much from the last NFC Championship game. And I think Jared Goff's already been to a Super Bowl. This team's got some playoff experience now. The team has stayed together. There's been no noise this offseason. They have plenty of ways to win. I think the defense is going to be a lot better this year as well. I think Aiden Hutchinson is going to get better. So I have the Detroit Lions representing the NFC. They have Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Monter St. Brown, Sam Laporta as well. I'm interested to see how Jameson Williams, who they drafted a few years ago, is going to look this year. I think the wide receivers would kind of be the only issue on this offensive side of the ball. If the lineman is stacked, top 5 offensive line in the league, Terrion Arnold, I think, is going to transform that secondary for the Lions as well. So Chiefs, Lions, Super Bowl in New Orleans. I ultimately have the Kansas City Chiefs going on a three-peat to be the first NFL franchise to ever win 3 Super Bowls in a row. 8 teams have tried, 8 teams have failed. I think this team that tries it now will do it in New Orleans in February. I just think it's too much firepower. They know how to win. It doesn't matter how they look, September, October. It starts to matter November, December, January. Once you get to the playoffs, this team knows how to win. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones. I know they lost L'Jarius Sneed, but I just think this defense is going to get a lot better too. Marquise Brown is now on the team. Xavier Worthy is now on the team. Rashee Rice is back with the team. Juju Smith-Schuster is now on the team as well. So the wide receivers should be a lot better. Isaiah Pacheco, I think he'll have a monster year this year. Travis Kelce is going to regress a little bit, but come playoff time, he's going to ramp it up. So I think they'll have him on cruise control this season with the wide receivers, the new guys, to the point where he can cruise control and then turn it up in the playoffs for a three-peat chance that I think will happen in New Orleans in February with the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Detroit Lions. So that is all I have. Kind of a fast-paced episode. I know the Ravens Chiefs game's about to kind of start, so that's kind of why I've been fast-paced. Put some pedal in my step this episode, but we are back. I will be back to react to week 1 of the NFL season, either Sunday or Monday. Great to be back. Can't wait for the football season to start in about 12 minutes, as it says on my clock. Excited, looking forward to talk about it. And let's have some fun. NFL's back, baby.